The American Adoption Congress, 13th International Conference, April 11th to the 14th, 1991, in Garden Grove, California. This is program number D151, tape number 57A.
Since the very beginning with the AAC, I remember when they first started forming the bylaws of the AAC. I was living here in Orange County at the time. And I'm a member of CUB, and I'm on the board of directors of WARM, which is Washington Adoption Rights Movement in Washington State. As well as currently I'm the first alternate regional director of our Region 6 up there. Susan, who's our representative adoptee, is also from the Seattle area, and I'm really happy to have her down here with me today. She is, I feel, a very accomplished author, and I'm going to mention your books, and I don't know if you have any with you.
A few of mine.
Oh, good. Okay. One book that started out just being a collection of poems that blew all the Triad members away in our support groups in Seattle is called Nobody's Baby. And that evolved into how many pages, Susan?
In the novel?
In the novel?
400.
400-page novel is what it evolved into. From a book of poems, this is the evolution of that book, Nobody's Baby.
Yes, I am.
She also wrote a...
Oh, you just made me feel real good.
She also wrote, I love this little book. This is a wonderful book that I use in therapy with adoptive parents up in Seattle area. It's called Dear Mom. It's just a little thin pamphlet. Dear Mom, I found my birth mother. And then the subtitle is An Adoptive Parent's Guide to the Scariest Thing in the World. And the feedback from adoptive parents who are in reunions with their adult children, and I mean adoptive parents with their children who have been reunited with birth family, is that this book has been tremendously helpful to them. And then the third book that I know about, and I'm sure she's got at least 50 buzzing around in her head right now, is a coloring book for grown-up adopted children, and that one's by Susie Moses. It's not by Susan Moses. Okay, Susan is also married to Bill. How many years?
18.
18 years, and they have 2 teenage children, son and daughter. And she's reunited with a large extended birth family. You're going to hear her story in a little while. Then next to Susan is Carol, another dear person who is a local LA-ite. Studio City?
Studio City.
Yeah. Carol Land, and she is co-founder along with Sharon Kaplan of the Family Network and the producer of Open Adoption, The Experts Speak Out. I participated in that film in Chicago last year at our national.
Different film.
Was that a different one? What was that one?
Open Adoption is the...
Open Adoption is the one. Okay.
You did Winning at Adoption.
Yes, and then the second one is Winning at Adoption. These are 2 wonderful videos. She has brochures. She and her husband, Barry Slobin, is it?
Yes.
I only know you as Susan Land, but Barry.
No,
Carol.
This is Susan.
I mean Carol. Carol,
More
yes.
representatives here. I'm in trouble with
This-
that conference.
Really? This is so funny in the opening, you know, when Sharon was introduced as Karen. It's so funny. So now you've got a dual identity too.
I can be Susan.
Anyway, they are the proud parents of Noah, who's 6 years old, and they have also grieved 2 disrupted adoptions, which you will hear about in depth later.
No, but I'll answer questions about it.
Actually, you're not going to
I
mention it?
wasn't going to, really?
Oh, well, please do.
Okay,
Please do mention it.
okay. Certainly, I just... Okay, you can ask me. I'll try to talk about them.
This is going to be
A little bit of time, you know, all these lawsuits in this much time.
So that was all submitted to be in your conference syllabus, but somehow it didn't get in. So before I actually get into a little bit about my personal story, I want to bring Nancy Verrier into our workshop where all the rest of the conference is right now. In the last AAC decree, the winter 91 AAC decree, she had an article, Primal Wound, Adoption as Experience, Not Concept. And I think this is a good lead into what we're talking about here today. I also want to say before I do this, we're going to basically have this in a 2-part thing today. So I know we do a lot of workshop hopping. I myself do that too. But if at all possible, if you can stay with us the full 2 hours, you'll get more benefit from this, because we're going to do, the first panel presentation is going to be on our grief and our pain and our loss, and that'll be pretty depressing if you leave right there. The second half of the panel presentation will be on our recovering process, the therapeutic changes and healing that is taking place and how that's being affected. So you really need to hear that part too. We're also going to have a 2-part experiential thing to involve all of us experientially. We're going to play a little bit together. So with that, now we'll read just a couple of little quotes from this article. The connection between biological mother and child is primal, mystical, mysterious, and everlasting. Far more than merely biological and historical, this primal connection is also cellular, psychological, emotional, and spiritual. So deep runs the connection between a child and its mother that the severing of the bond results in a profound wound for both, a wound from which neither fully recovers. In the case of adoption, the wound cannot be avoided, but it can and must be acknowledged and understood. Now you can just imagine how this inextricably connects the triad, this deep primal wound. For the adoptive parent taking this child in, I do think I know from your outline that you're going to touch on this, Carol, that it impacts on the adoptive parent as well, and certainly profoundly on the adoptee and the birth parent, all three of us. Now I would like Susan to just share with you briefly the image, the pictorial image that she got in her head when she asked, "What are we talking about, May?" And I quoted to her the title of this workshop, Loss, the Experience Shared by the Triad.
When we were at Children's Home Society preparing to make a conference call to Carol here so we could begin to become acquainted. And when May read that workshop title to me, I had this instant visual image of, all right, it's a scene in Africa. And there's this enormous anthill covered with red ants. And there's, it gets worse. There's a stake. And the adoptive parents, the adoptee, the birth mother are each tied to this stake, but our backs are all to one another, and we're each looking out in different directions. We're either going to be burned at the stake, or we're going to be eaten alive by the damn ants. That was the image I had.
It's pretty scary. All through this workshop, we're going to try to tap into visual images that portray really deep core feelings that all of us are carrying around. So hang on here with us as we go on. Just a little bit more back to Nancy Verrier's article. It's important to recognize that the adoptee was present when the substitution of mothers took place. The experience was real. That he does not remember consciously the event should not detract from its truth. And at the moment the substitution occurred, it wasn't a concept to be learned or a theory to be understood. Rather, it was a traumatizing experience about which the adoptee may have persistent and ambivalent feelings, all of which may be legitimate. Now, when I read that, and she has that underlined, the only way I would change that is to say all of which are legitimate. These feelings are legitimate. He is not abnormal, sick, or crazy. His feelings are an appropriate response to the most devastating experience one could ever have, the loss of the mother. I want to read one more short thing from a letter that a birth mother, Mary, has given me permission to use this. I'm only going to read a short paragraph out of this. She wrote this recently to her daughter who is turning 13 that she has not seen since she was born. Mary has not had any subsequent children and is unmarried at this time. She is planning to be married, however. This birthday has been very hard for me. I am full of tears which keep pouring like rain showers. My body spent 9 months preparing to birth and mother you, and then our relationship was abruptly ended. I was never encouraged to honor the truth of my heart and the truth of my body. One's heart does not forget, and the body holds memories as well. I read recently, if a whale calf dies prematurely, the mother carries it on her back till the body falls apart. Perhaps in this way the mother whale is able to remember this baby, to remember its weight on her back, and to write its name indelibly in the memory of her life. I will always carry you within me. I will always remember how it felt to birth you, to hold you, to rock you. The pain of losing you is always there. The baby has long since fallen away, yet I am forbidden to know what has taken its place. So all I am left with is pain and pain's lessons, insight, truth, understanding, compassion, and wisdom. It will never be easy for me to move through these spaces when the pain overflows and fills me. When I first read this, when she first shared this letter with me, and I tried to read this to a friend, I was sobbing. I'm amazed I got through it today because it so eloquently expressed how I feel and felt. And I think if a mother whale does that with her baby, how much more profoundly, and I don't know if we're higher on the evolutionary scale or not, that's questionable, but how profoundly it affects human mothers and their babies to lose a baby. And if any of you attended Susan Miller Haven's workshop yesterday, she talked about having no body to do any kind of concrete grieving like we do when there's a death and there's a body to grieve. Okay. I thought I'd start with my own personal story in sharing a few of the paradoxes of my life. I came into this world the fourth child of an Assembly of God minister and his family. So there were four siblings, but I was raised as an only child. So that was the first big paradox in my life. I'm an only child, but I had siblings that I didn't know. The reason for that is that I was a change of life baby and a very big surprise in my parents' life. That isn't the way they put it. They said I was an accident. And so I didn't really know my siblings until I was almost an adult and got to know them as adults. The other part about my father being an Assembly of God minister was that thousands of people throughout the country revered him as almost a deity. And even I, when I was sitting in his presence in the church, when he's in the pulpit, kind of had that kind of reverence for him. But when he was at home, the revere turned to fear because he was a very abusive, very dysfunctional father in the home. So that, again, was a real disturbing thing. Right out of high school, I became engaged to my high school sweetheart, and I was engaged for 18 months. However, my fiancé joined the Navy right out of high school and disappeared. He went overseas. So here again, a paradox in my life was I was 18, engaged to be married, but I had no boyfriend and no relationship. But I couldn't date because I was engaged. So that really isolated me a lot from any kind of peer involvement. I had grown up in a very sheltered, very naive and innocent state. I was the perfectly good minister's daughter. It had always been said to me that I must be the example for the entire congregations that my father ministered to, and not just those congregations, but to the community at large, because he was not only pastor of a local church, he was I'm trying to think of the name of this, anyway, head of the ministerial association in our town. So you can imagine what a devastating thing it was when, while my fiancé was overseas, I became pregnant by a member of our family, a very close member of our family that I had known all my life. I'd not ever not known this individual. Here again was a very dramatic paradox, because what had happened was an extremely brief encounter that was not a complete sexual act, and I was still a virgin, but I was pregnant. I didn't tell this story for many, many years, and a few years ago Susan Summers came out with her book. Have any of you read her book, Family Secrets? And in there she describes a very similar situation where she was 3 months pregnant when she got married and a virgin. So anyway, I had 2 doctors examine me during that period of time when I had all these blatant signs of pregnancy, and they didn't even test for that because it was so clear to them, so obvious, that I had not had sex. But eventually, at 3 months, they did determine that that was what was going on with my body. Of course I told my fiancé as soon as I found out, and he insisted that we get married. We were 18. When you're 18, you're invincible. Nothing can really touch you. And of course, when you're 18 and in love, you think you can whip the world. So I really had a lot of reservations. I thought, this is a really crummy way to start a life together. But we did go ahead and get married, and that was the beginning of a dual life. On the wedding night, I had sex for the first time. It's the time young women looking forward to being brides, you know, you dream of your honeymoon and your wedding night. And in the middle of my very first sexual encounter, it had to be interrupted because I was sick and throwing up from being 3 months pregnant. So it was a pretty bizarre beginning of our married life together. Because of the nature of who the father is, that makes it very weird too, because not only am I my daughter's mother, I'm her aunt. Her father is her uncle. Her siblings are her cousins. So that's real different too. During the 9 months of pregnancy, there were multiple traumas and losses and disruption. In a 9-month period, I made 5 major moves. She was conceived in Seattle. I moved to Florida. These are not across from Garden Grove to Santa Ana. I moved from Washington to Florida to Newport, Rhode Island, again a long distance, to New Jersey, and 2 moves in New Jersey in 9-month period, so that there was tremendous disruption just in physical moving. Coupled with that was the fact that, unbeknownst to me, when I married him, I married a teenage alcoholic. Now, I had grown up in a teetotaling home, so I had no idea how to recognize signs of alcoholism. I don't think that would have mattered. We were in love and invincible and could conquer the world. So I probably would have married him anyway. Anyway, the fact that I was pregnant with some other man's child really, really became something he could not deal with. He didn't have the coping abilities to deal with that. And so he turned to drinking, and the abuse just intensified. And there was a lot of physical violence and emotional abuse while I was carrying my daughter. One of the books I'm putting on our recommended book list is The Secret Life of the Unborn Child, which really addresses a lot of the intrauterine effects, and this will be important later on in our talking. Coupled with that, I did not know this until 21 years later when I got my hospital records. I had cancer and was on chemotherapy during that pregnancy. I knew I was terribly ill, but I didn't know what was wrong with me. I thought this was just what happens when you're pregnant. I was going every week to this clinic and getting medication, but I didn't know it was chemotherapy. At a certain point, I learned this later, they stopped the medication because they didn't want to affect my baby. And then I was put back on maintenance after the birth, maintenance chemotherapy. When I got the records, I expected to get 2 or 3 pages of records of a birth. I got 107 pages. And when I looked at this stack of records and read through them, I thought, this isn't mine, you know. but there were so many pertinent details that had specifically to do with my family and my situation, that there was no mistaking it. Plus the fact that it came back 3 times and I ended up having a hysterectomy at 29, but it's amazing that they were so secretive about telling people what was going on. Of course, we were only a couple of dumb teenage kids. Besides the multiple moves and the violence and abuse and the being sick with cancer and on chemotherapy, there were many attempts on my life, and at one of those times I was able to get away and get to a payphone and called home to my father and said I had to come home. This was from New Jersey, Rhode Island to Florida. My father's response to that was, "You can't come home. I would have to resign my church. I would have to leave the ministry. My career as a minister would be over, and we would have to leave town. You can't do this." And so I said, "Oh, I guess I can't do this." There was nowhere to go. It's so different today. It's hard for young people today to even comprehend what the world was like 30 years ago, 31 years ago. So what I did was the only thing left to do, and that was with great fear and panic, go back into that home where that abusive man was that I had to live with. In the 8th month of my pregnancy, my sister's husband died suddenly of a heart attack at the age of 37. I was extremely close, bonded to him. I had known him all my life, practically. My sister had married him when I was 5. And so I had to go home for that funeral. So what I did was wear 2 size small girdles. And it's interesting, the prenatal visit I had the day before I flew down to Florida, the doctor thought he heard 2 heartbeats. And I was excited. I wanted to have twins. This thing kept going on in my mind. I knew I was pregnant. I loved being pregnant. And then it would hit me immediately, but you're not going to be able to keep this baby. We had 5 sets of twins in my family, and I had always hoped to have twins someday. The birth father had twins. So I was tremendously excited. Plus, that gave me a reason for being so big at 5 months of pregnancy when I was really 8 months pregnant at the funeral. So again, if any of you've read The Secret Life of the Unborn Child, here now was a death and profound grieving and loss and shame, fear that I'm going to be found out at the funeral. But I went anyway. I think the most profound loss to me during that pregnancy was the overall isolation, just lost from every way. No friends. I moved from Florida to Rhode Island and hid out in this tiny little apartment. I was a very religious girl, so at least 3 times a week I went to church. Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. And of course it was very, very visible that I was married. My husband came with me when he was in town. And so we had to play this charade of being the charming young couple expecting their first baby, and then I would go home to the abuse and the knowledge that this baby was not going to be born. The isolation was further increased by having to distance from anybody. If I got close to anyone and they wanted to come to my house for coffee or see the nursery, or they would discover that there was no nursery and there were no baby things, and they'd learn my secret. I have to jump over this really fast. Somewhere along the line, I got in touch with an agency. I have total amnesia for that. I've tried hypnosis, I've tried autogenics, I've tried regression, I've tried every way through therapy, all kinds of ways to touch into that. I cannot reach it. The pain was so intense that the only way I could deal with that was to totally block it out of my mind. It didn't exist. My husband that I was married to for 11 years remembers it in great detail, and we've gone over and over it. Still, I can't reach it. But when I called my father, his only solution was he would try to find a home for unwed mothers to put me in. Now, I was not unwed. I was a married woman, but he was going to put me in a home for unwed mothers. I don't know if my father directed me to that agency or perhaps my minister, who I finally told the secret to, But somehow I was directed to an agency in New Jersey, and that's where I relinquished my child. The relinquishment papers actually are in Mary Jo Rillera's book, The Adoption Search Book, if any of you have bought that book out here during the conference. She used those because she thought they were the most horrendous surrender papers she'd ever seen that a mother has to sign, giving away her child. They say that in the surrender papers, in the relinquishment papers, that I'm an unwed mother, which was not true. It's interesting, our selective amnesia. This is part of the post-traumatic stress disorder that we all experience too. I remember vividly the 5 days in the hospital with my baby. I held her, she was there at my side, I fed her, I communicated with her in every way I knew, both verbally, and we would lock in intently with our eyes, and I tried to love my baby and just fill her with love so that someday when she was 18 she would come and find me. So that part I remember. I do not remember leaving the hospital. I went again into amnesia after the 5th day when she left the hospital, and I stayed 5 more days. I only know this because of the hospital records. After that, the abuse increased, even intensified more. My husband drank more. On weekends when he had the duty, he would send his buddies to his wife's house to have sex with his whore wife. And I was terrified all the time. I was terrified one of these men would be able to break my locked door down and rape me. It never happened. I think I'm going to skip over a lot of this for lack of time, but I've already mentioned that I always felt like a fake, like I was two people. I was one person inside. All the birth mothers here probably can identify with this. And while I was well received in the few circles, mainly church circles that I was in, I was a church organist, pianist, very involved in music departments wherever I went. They didn't know my secret, and I always felt if they really knew what was going on, they wouldn't allow me to come to church. And maybe that was true, given the times back then. I want to say one more word about the family system I was in. This Assembly of God minister who had 4 children, 3 of the 4 children became birth parents. I didn't know at that time that my brother also had relinquished a child. I did know at age 10 that my sister relinquished a child. And then I was the 3rd one to relinquish a child. So 3 out of the 4 became birth parents. I have since done searches for everyone, including those birth parents, other birth parents besides my siblings. And all the people are reunited, except that I'm not reunited with my daughter, although I found her. One more thing I want to say is that, like adoptees carry around phantom birth parents carry around phantom children, a phantom child. And I had that phantom child with me, ever present, ever conscious, waking moment, and even in my dreams, until I found her at age 19. When she was 2, every 2-year-old that had dark curly hair, I would think, maybe that's my daughter. And I was moving all over the place. In 37 years, I moved 58 times. So I was all over the country. I was across the ocean. But wherever I went, I thought maybe this age-appropriate person was my daughter. It was really nice to have that phantom go away when I found her. Even though searches don't always, never turn out the way we expect them to, we can have benefits from them, and that's one of the benefits. I don't have to live with the ghost phantom child anymore. I think I'm going to stop there, leave you in the pain and the trauma and the loss, and we're going to get to the healing part in the second half and go on to Susan now.
My name's Susan Moses. I'm 41 years old. I've been a wife for 18 years, and my husband and I have 2 children, age 16 and 17. I've been a corporate comptroller. I've served on commissions for the governor of my state. I've been nominated for Who's Who in the West. But I'm a child. I'm a perpetual child. I'm an adopted child. Although this is something I've never done before, I'm going to let the child that dwells within me speak to you about being adopted and the losses that are common to many adoptees. Like everyone else, I began life in a very, very safe place, a perfect place. My universe was only as large as the space I occupied within my mother. It was a warm place of sound, rhythm, sight, sensation, safety. There was nothing unfamiliar because this space was finite. I knew my mother, the rhythm of her day, the cadence of her voice, her responses from tension to relaxation, because I was physically a part of her. It was totally symbiotic. I was in mother, mother was me. There were no lines to define where one ended and the other began. Like all infants in utero, to me, she and I were one person in every respect because I knew no other concept. Then, one winter morning, shortly after Christmas, I was born. At 8:48 that morning, as my mother drifted in an ether twilight, everything I knew vanished. I had been part of something very known, and now I was severed irrevocably from that security and comfort. I don't believe that being born was any more frightening or alien to me than it is to anyone else. The difference is that a non-adoptee is then gathered up in their mother's embrace, held close and spoken to by their mom. The child hears that same heartbeat, recognizes the cadence of her voice, knows this is the same person and feels very safe again. It's a transition of care and safety from the world the child knew into the one in which he would have to learn to live. I was not accorded such safe passage, and it would be 36 years before I felt that safe again. Instead, I was passed from stranger to stranger, ever protesting the strangers. My adoptive parents said I did nothing but scream until I was 6 months old. Perhaps it was my only protest. Perhaps I was terrified. In the beginning, that newborn child perceives itself as the mother and child being one, just like before the child was born. Mom later starts to play games with the child, plays peekaboo. Now you see me, now you don't. And slowly, by daily activities, the child becomes accustomed to the idea that you don't have to see mom for her to exist, and that the child is complete without the mother. This gradually gained concept is not afforded many adoptees. My mom vanished, taking with her a piece of me, a cornerstone in the idea that I am whole, the infant bud of an ego. The abruptness of this event has had a lifelong effect on me. That premature amputation from my mother is an event like any other amputation. I continue to get phantom feelings from the part of me that was severed away. Perhaps she went away for the best of all reasons. But to me, that infant within feels it one way and one way alone, final and complete abandonment. My mom left me and I didn't know why. As a child, my adoptive mother told me a lot about how a mother loves her child. I imagined I must have been truly terrible for my own mother to give me away. So I tried harder. I did better, so this adoptive mother wouldn't leave me too. Her desire to keep me couldn't be as strong as the desire of my mother who bore me. I was taken care of by my adoptive mother's charitable heart and goodwill, not because I could expect it, by virtue of the simple fact that I was born to her. I was accorded no rights to anything just by being born, not even a family. I was a guest whose welcome could be revoked at any time. I was lucky to be chosen, and I could become unlucky and unchosen again. And I want to stay chosen, because after all, I really do love my adoptive parents. I love them, but we don't have much in common beyond our lifelong history. We don't look alike. We don't respond alike, we don't think alike or act alike. It was an effort to be less like myself and more like them. But I loved them, and it was worth trying so hard. They never knew who I was, because I was always just trying to be what I thought they wanted, rather than just be myself. I envied my aunt and my cousins, who were so relaxed around my adoptive mother. There was a common thread between them that I never had, that linked them together effortlessly. No one around me was like me, and I felt different because I was different, but I tried not to let them know. It was my secret. Maybe they wouldn't want me if they knew how different I really was. In so many ways, they were strangers, but they were all I had. My extended family and my parents' friends were very nice to me, but they were also quick to remind me how lucky I was and how grateful I should be for my parents' care. As an adolescent, my friends thought they understood what it was like to not know who you are, because they were going through normal self-discovery themselves, but they never realized what I knew within. For them, it was transitory. For me, it was permanent. Another common support structure is our church. I'd go and I'd hear a lot of Bible stories about birthrights, and I'd wonder how I could earn that. Perhaps the most meaningful Bible story for me was the one with the two mothers arguing before Solomon over the baby. I wondered which one would rather possess me and which would rather I just live, since I had two mothers. To me, the woman who would rather I just live was my birth mother. And I had a very clear concept of what it meant to be born in sin, for I unquestionably was. Everyone, even the law, knew what was best for me. The truth was perceived by them as so unspeakably bad that even my birth certificate had to be doctored up to erase the truth. The records were sealed, and everything looks like I'm my adoptive parents' child, except I know in my heart that I'm different, and I feel like nobody's baby. Inside, because I wanted my mama back, I felt like an ingrate, a traitor, and it felt awful. All my support systems had failed. Even so, I existed. Now that's interesting, because I don't feel like I was born. My story didn't begin in a hospital. It didn't begin with people, with a mom and dad. Mine began when I was 2 months old in a social worker's office. I was very much a business transaction. So I didn't feel like I was born, and I questioned how human I was. I didn't feel like an authentic, bona fide human being. And if I wasn't born, could I die? I just don't know. This all began before I had words, so it's difficult, almost impossible, to affix words to some of these feelings. Since it's so hard to explain, some people dismiss it as unimportant, and others deny that I suffered any losses at all. I feel like I was witness to a Holocaust. I saw it, I was there, but other people who were there said it never happened. Deep within, I wanted back what I lost. I wanted to fit. I wanted to be whole, and I wanted my mama. You're next.
That's a tough act to follow. Well, I'm going to be talking about loss from the adoptive parent's perspective, which really doesn't have, for me, as much to do about adoption as it does to have to do with infertility. And I've basically come up with 5 different areas, which are, of course, intertwined, where those losses have been most prominently felt. The first was a feeling of powerlessness. Growing up, I grew up in a rather safe, intact family where I thought I could do anything, and that was what my experience bore out. I got good grades, I did well in school, everybody loved me. I didn't think there was anything that if I worked at it hard enough, I couldn't get. And then I was hit with infertility.
This is the end of side A. Please turn your tape over and continue on side B. The American Adoption Congress 13th International Conference, April 11th to the 14th, 1991 in Garden Grove, California. This is program number D151, tape 57B.
For any of you who have not searched yet, is a tremendously healing experience, but it's also, like I read out of Mary's letter, every kind of emotion you can possibly imagine. It's the wildest Disneyland ride you'll ever go on in your life, of extreme opposite ends kind of emotions and feelings. At the same time, I joined CUB, Concerned United Birth Parents, which is a very active organization in this community. And for a year during the search process, I attended weekly, I think we were doing weekly meetings at the time, and they were my life's blood. I don't think I could have survived without those support group meetings. There's no way you can ever attend 1,000 support group meetings and find another person who's going to have the same situation as yours. We all have unique situations. Yet in hearing all the stories that I heard over that year's period of time, it really did help prepare me as much as I think one can be prepared for what I found at the end of my search. When I found my daughter, of course, along the way, I'd learned much about her family, and there were amazing coincidences. In every adoption search, I think there are coincidences that just blow you away. For instance, my daughter has 7 biological sisters and 1 biological brother, my son. In 29 years of her life, she had only 2 addresses, 2 residences. The one her parents lived in at the time of her adoption, and the one they moved to. Her address in both places was 63 John Street. Now, her only biological brother is John, and he was born in 63. And they're just all kinds of coincidences like that. It's kind of neat, I think, because it makes you really feel connected. Anyway, I tried every which way. I was still being the good girl, the good birth mother, and tried every which way to make contact with my daughter other than just going directly to her parents' house and knocking on the door. I tried to go through the agency. I had horrendous medical history to pass on. I had had 12 deaths in my family since her relinquishment. I had been through now 3 clinical deaths. Just horrendous things that I felt compelled that I had to pass on. At that point, I wasn't thinking that I was embarking on a relationship with my daughter, although that in the deepest part of my heart is what I wanted more than anything. So at that point, when I was dealing with the agency, I thought it was most imperative to pass on medical information to her. The agency absolutely refused. I contacted many different people, ultimately found the attorney who handled the adoption, and he was the first person who thought I had a legitimate reason for contacting her parents. So he sent out letters. He sent out 2 letters to their address. The letters never came back, but they never got the letters. Ultimately, I found them on my own, and the only way I could reach them, because they had an unlisted number, was to, which I had, but I wouldn't use that. Somehow I felt that was really a violation of privacy for some reason, and I've never called the number, but I know it's their, I do now know it's their number. But I went and knocked on the door, and I timed it when I knew through my search that she was attending classes at Seton Hall University. She was now in college studying nursing. Her mother opened the door, and I had a physical description of her from my non-identifying information. I am 5'6". I was wearing boots probably 3 inches high, so I was about 5'9" that day, and her mother is 5 feet. And she came to the door, opened the door. There was snow on the ground. This is in New Jersey in March 20th, 1980. So she's looking out on this bright snow and couldn't really see me as she looked out from her darker living room. And so when she opened the door, I said, "Bertha, my name is May, and I've come a long way today to see you. It's about your daughter Arlene." And immediately she opened the door and she said, "Oh, do come in," just warm and friendly. And she said, "What's it about?" I hope nothing's wrong. And so this all took about probably 30 seconds at the most. By the time I got inside where she could look at me, she looked at me and she said, "I know who you are. You're Arlene's mother." Just like that. We ended up visiting for 3 or 4 hours that day, and it was incredibly emotional. We hugged, we sat on the couch and held hands while I read her a letter I had written to them. I thought she would read it herself, but she was so moved emotionally that she said, "I can't read this, will you read it to me?" So it took about an hour to read the letter together. She had an incredible need to share, and this is how she put it, our daughter with me. She never said my daughter or your daughter. She said our daughter throughout the whole time. And she showed me probably 100 pictures of my daughter, of our daughter. And she showed me every kind of thing that she could lay her hands on, needlework that my daughter was working on. She's an artist, and she showed me paintings and drawings, and she showed me term papers that she'd written, and just every kind of thing imaginable. At the same time, this woman had incredible ambivalence about it, and while she thought it was destined that I come there, she thought it was meant to be that those letters were lost in the mail, because if they had received them, they would have asked, Arlene is her name, and she would have said, "No, I'm not interested in meeting my birth mother," and that would have been the end of it. I think it really would have been the end of it at that point that I was at in my process. I would have gone away and not bothered them. And so she felt, and later it was told to me that my daughter felt, it was meant to be that I come there that day. And her adoptive mother was in awe. These are her words, in awe of how much alike we were. Apparently, Arlene is like my clone. She is more like me, and we find this as a phenomenon in adoption reunions, that the child given up for adoption is more like the birth parent than any subsequent children that you have most of the time. It's just really an interesting phenomenon that happens. I'm not saying that always happens, but we see it a lot. I don't know what that's about. Anyway, at the same time that she was thrilled that I was there and wanted to know everything about me, she probably 5 or 6 times said, "I am in awe of this. It's 100% heredity. Look at you, listen to you. Everything you tell me, you're describing our daughter." She also felt that we would never meet, because she knew Arlene's emotional vulnerability. And this is why I went into such detail earlier about the kinds of trauma when I was carrying her those 9 months. According to Dr. Vernia and other researchers, another good book is When Babies Remember Birth by Chamberlain. Those babies are affected by their in utero experiences. And I went through every kind of trauma imaginable during that 9 months. And I believe that that has predisposed her to such a vulnerability that the very thought, the very idea that I am even in the state, much less in her parents' living room, puts her in such a state of trauma that she is incapable of saying yes to meeting me face to face. How she reacted was to become hysterical when she came home that day from school, and of course I had left by then. And she clung to her mother. She was 19 years old, but she had to have her dad sleep in her bed, and she slept with her mother that night because she was so fearful, the emotions that it brought up for her. That fear remained, I don't know how long. Her mother called me 2 days later, her adoptive mother, to tell me what had happened over the last 2 days. And she was afraid to go to the door for fear that lady would be at the door. She was afraid to answer the phone for fear that lady would be calling, afraid to walk down the street for fear I would walk up to her. I had assured her mother that I would not do that, because one of the things I personally believe in so strongly is that this is a matter of choice for both parties. I think that we owe it to one another. I think birth mothers, birth parents certainly owe a one-time visit to the adoptee to get some questions answered and so they can look at each other. I really believe they owe that to each other, but I also feel and this is where Susan and I do not agree at all, but I think the adoptee owes that to the birth mother too. You know, we are inextricably connected, and we both sides deserve to have that one-time face-to-face encounter, in my opinion. And then after that, it's whatever the two people mutually agree upon as to whether, you know, what you do in ongoing reunion. That's my personal opinion. Susan may share some on that, her thoughts. If I had asked for pictures during that 3 or 4 hour visit with her mother, she would have given me anything I asked for. She had an incredible empathy, mother to mother. She said things like, every year on your birthday I thought of you and I cried for you and I prayed for you. I knew it must be so hard. But she said also, I would never tell Arlene that. So a good adoptive mother doesn't have these fantasies about the birth mother, you see. She also said, I think of the day that Arlene gets married. You should be at her wedding. You're her mother. But I would never tell Arlene that. You know, this is kind of a theme that ran through our conversation. Her ambivalence was around the fact that she wanted to protect her daughter at all cost. And if this meant inducing more trauma in her, she was the Velcro baby, Susan. Susan speaks of two kinds of babies. One of them is a clingy Velcro adoptee baby.
You gotta peel it off,
And my daughter was a Velcro baby with her mother. Very, very clingy, very fearfully clinging out of fear of abandonment, I'm sure, and the incredible trauma that she experienced in the womb and losses. So her mother was going to protect her every which way if she did not want to meet me. And I agreed with that. I did not want to add to my daughter's trauma. I still feel that somehow, someday, we will have to come together in a face-to-face meeting, but she may need a lot of therapy before she can get to that point. I've learned a lot about working with adoptees the last 18 years, and some of those who were so traumatized as infants take a long time before they're ready to meet birth parents. Okay, I'm going to real fast. In my healing, besides joining support groups and going back and getting more education, I reconnected with life. I broke out of the isolation. I found validation for my experience, acceptance in the support groups, acknowledgement. These are all things that I encourage every one of you. If you're not in one, get one. If you don't have one in community, start a support group. Triad members and my association with them saved my life. I think that's enough. There was a lot more, but I'm out of time.
Mike.
Gee, you guys are so quiet.
They're either asleep or we're doing something right. One of the two.
Okay, when as I ended the first part, the portion about loss, I talked about a Holocaust. I survived that Holocaust, and I thought I was just fine until I met my birth mother. Then the magnitude of the loss dawned full force, and it was hand in hand with that frightened, grateful adoptee. Denial had been a very comfortable thing to me that was at that point beyond my grasp. My reunion with my birth mother has been ecstatic and tormenting for me. And for her, it's been unmanageable, delightful, and infuriating. She can't cope with my losses or her shame. And I'm living witness to both. She's in the closet, far too frightened to leave it. To deal with the losses and the reality of my life, there really are few options. It boils down to coping with some and resolving others. As a child, all I could do was try to cope. Sometimes that coping would be to deny there were issues at all. When denial was impossible, I occasionally retreated into actual self-deception, saying, I probably am really an orphan. It's easier to forgive someone for dying and leaving you than it is to forgive someone for living and leaving you. But the biggest part of my childhood and adolescence was spent ignoring adoption. I didn't think much about it. I didn't talk much about it. I didn't look for familiar-looking people in malls. The denial of the people around me had me doubting that adoption was any sort of loss at all. I really doubted I had a birth mother. I didn't think she was dead, just that she never really existed at all, like she was a figment of my imagination. Now, this doesn't really make sense, but sometimes things just don't make sense. There were also times when there was no escaping the ramifications of my being an adoptee. My parents celebrated and continue to celebrate my chosen day, and my birthday is a non-event. On my birthday, since I was small, I'd let myself think about my birth mother. And it was the longest day of the year for me. I'd stay in my room and I'd think and I'd write. Writing helped me cope. Another way I coped was to run to the warmth, security, and peace of a warm bath. Low music, low lights, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out what this was all about and why I found the comfort in it. I don't think all the losses can't be resolved. Some are a matter of history that will remain with me until I die. I was separated prematurely from my birth mother and will spend the rest of my life feeling like part of me was separated away. I'll forever get phantom feelings from that missing part, from that mom who left before I had a chance to learn that she and I were two separate people. As it regards feeling safe, I have experienced that fleetingly. I can remember being a little girl and feeling frightened in the night and bringing my blanket downstairs to sit in the hall outside my parents' bedroom door, wanting to go in and knowing that it wouldn't help, that I wouldn't truly feel totally safe. But 5 years ago, when my birth mother first told me, I experienced a feeling of inviolable safety. And it was then that I recognized how truly unsafe I had felt before. The feeling was as primitive as mankind can feel. Understanding why my birth mother surrendered me helps me intellectually, but the perception of abandonment remains. After I first met my birth mother, each parting felt as bad as the original abandonment probably felt. And today, although that original experience is very much alive inside me, it's not so much like she's going away forever when we part. The panic factor has diminished. Familiarity has helped, as well as the fact that I've been graphic about just what I need from her. And in some ways, she's responded. I don't expect her to read my mind. Mom, I need you to hold me so I'll feel safe. I need to hear you say you thought about me, you missed me, that you wish things could have been different. Mom, I need to hear you tell me you love me. I don't know these things. I don't assume these things. I can only know if you tell me. Tell me this is true, and tell me that I'm yours. All my life I felt like a gatecrasher at somebody's family picnic. I had this amended birth certificate that granted me entry, but I knew that I didn't really belong. I had no birthright to their event. Since the dawn of mankind, people have practiced a primitive behavior. For every significant life transition, a christening, a confirmation or bar mitzvah, a birthday, a wedding, a funeral, we do the same thing that man has done through the ages. We gather our own kind to us. Why? For our own kind, our genetic pool, our family, to validate, affirm, and witness one of our own gene pool traversing one of life's passages, assuring that our common genes go forward in time. It is instinctive, Somewhere within we are driven to do this, and this drive to gather our own kind to us in an adoptee is as urgent and unrequited and no less a biological imperative than it is for anyone else. We are a disenfranchised people, deprived of this most basic birthright. In light of our history of separation, even reunion does not truly resolve this loss, but it helps. It helps a lot. Some issues truly can be resolved. As an adolescent, there's the common factor of trying to establish an identity in all teenagers. The adoptee's friends assume that the adoptee's identity crisis is no different from their own, but they're wrong. There are no familial maps for the adoptee, and it's impossible for the adoptee to explain that they're in totally uncharted waters. They have no compass, no sextant to guide them. They have no clue who they are. The adoptee withdraws from discussion, floats away from total attachment, but remains close enough to keep peers in sight. An adoptee commonly may belong to several social groups, but they always feel like they don't really belong anywhere at all. As a group, we have poor boundaries as adoptees. The first boundary you learn in life is who is part of your family. Well, anyone can be part of ours. Anyone at all. You don't have to be related to us to be part of our family. If we're missing this most basic concept, is it any surprise that we have poor boundaries? And a reunion with a birth mother who's in the closet can aggravate this problem. Then we don't know if we're in or we're out. Theoretically, we should be part of a church family. Church was a place I left and returned to many times. As adoptees, we respond to the idea that Moses was an adoptee, that Jesus loves all the little children, that God is our Father irrespective of our unsure breeding. But Moses left to go with his own people, and the sins of the father will be visited upon us. What sins? Adultery. We identify well with the idea of being born in sin. Adoptees can make truly sincere, humble Christians. For an adoptee, church makes us ashamed of our status as nowhere else can, and it's never a truly comforting place. There's no comfort in the law either. In the eyes of the legal system, we are the only group of people regarded as permanent children. We are protected from a terrible truth. Just because we're not told the truth doesn't change what it is. We are adoptees. We are not adopted children. And the information void is far worse than any truth could be. Reunion holds the potential of achieving true and complete resolution of some of our losses. We can stop feeling like the person in the mirror is a stranger by meeting the people who look like us. We can be around people who think like us, respond like us, act like us, and feel okay just being as we really are. But what we need goes beyond the physical. We need to feel human. And humans, everyone, do two things. They're born and they die. We share neither of these two life passages with our adoptive family. They know nothing of our birth and cannot give us a sense of our own very human beginnings. And when a loved one in our adoptive family dies, it doesn't really connect with us on a mortal level. We are not related to the deceased, and the death has no relevance to our own mortality. It's a great loss, an incredible loss to us, but not the kind that stirs up the impetus for one to come to terms with the concept that our time is finite too. Only our birth mother can tell us how we came into this world, give us a human beginning. It is her exclusive right and privilege to do so. We know the generic facts. To personally feel placed on the timeline of humanity, we must turn to her. Adoptees are not looking for prurient tales of teenage lust, any more than a 5-year-old who asks his mom to tell him where he came from. We simply want a true personal account of how we got here, an account that logically moves from when we did not exist at all to the point of parting. How our birth parents met. If there was a romance, that's nice, but if not, that's okay too. How the birth mother felt when she discovered she was pregnant. The reaction of the birth father if he was told. Why it wouldn't work out. How she felt about her baby before it was born. Did she talk yet to us? How she came to the decision to relinquish and what that was like, and if she said goodbye. How she felt when she went into labor and when her baby was gone. A birth story. A story from the beginning of life, no less complete than any mom would tell her non-adopted child. Every story needs a beginning, and what we know begins long after that beginning. Make us real. Let us share in this most basic of human experiences so we can feel as though we weren't dropped here by aliens from Pluto. Make us authentic, bona fide people, placed in the world like everyone else. It has nothing to do with sex. It has to do with life and granting us a full share in this life. It's so hard for us to articulate these needs. We hear many adoptive parents and the occasional birth parents say, my child isn't interested at all. She's never been curious. I even asked her if she wanted to know anything, and she said no. Do not misread your adoptee. That adoptee has not misread you. She knows what you want to hear, is appropriately grateful, and has learned what to keep to herself even when directly asked. It's a response to survive. The final chapter of Resolution for Adoptees is conscious acknowledgement of our losses. The least threatening way to achieve this is through involvement with Triad support groups. It's safe to discuss these unspeakable truths there. As a group, adoptees have been denied validation and affirmation of what we know in our hearts has been true all our lives. The real support, however, comes if our parents, birth as well as adoptive, stand with us and say, yes, we saw the Holocaust too. You didn't imagine it. It was real for us all. And we're going to go hand in hand together to find the way to live with it as best we can.
A couple of comments on those that have preceded me here. One, it seems that we're all hitting education and support as a real common theme, and I think that goes across the triad. I would suggest also that if we can eliminate search and reunion by making them unnecessary, we'd be doing a service to all of us. That's what we've tried to do in our personal adoption, and certainly something we're working for across the board.
In other words, meaning they've never been
Meaning there's
separated.
never a separation, right. I mean, our son is never going to have to search because his family is there, and he meets with people on a regular basis who do look like him. I'm not saying that the pain is gone. I'm not saying that life is going to be easy. I mean, and we're already seeing at 6 the results, you know, the anger of being adopted, of being wrested from his family. But he's got concrete people to ask questions of and concrete issues to deal with. And I would add to what Susan said about the right and privilege of the birth mother to tell those birth details, the responsibility of the birth mother to do that, which is something that we're having a little trouble with. We have, our birth mom we have extended family contact, and she, at this point, has made herself unavailable to him and to us. Ways of healing, ways of moving on. I would say the first for me is sensitizing family, friends, and society, becoming an activist and a reformer. Tell people when comments are hurtful. I think it's important that we, as a group, educate teachers, doctors, clergymen, and friends. Somebody brought up in the last workshop I was in, well, you don't do this in a supermarket line when your child is standing there and somebody makes a lousy comment. But there are times, and certainly I think that there was a little study done by a pediatrician on all of the adoption research in medical books. And they found, I think, a total of 6 paragraphs in all of the medical books in this country. And yet doctors are fundamental in arranging many adoptions, both with young birth mothers and also dealing with adoptees who come to them when they're children, who come to pediatricians with, well, he's not doing well in school. They're the first person that families go to, and yet these people have no knowledge about adoption often. Lawyers as well. I researched this myself. There are no courses in law schools in this country on, and even in family law courses on adoption. And yet, look at the role lawyers are playing in adoptions. Second was to come to an acknowledgement that these offhand comments and the looks and the ways that we get hurt continue, and to not be surprised by them. That is somehow a way of empowering oneself. If you know they're coming, even if you don't know when or where, it really helps. For me, personally, adoption and the losses of adoption and moving beyond it has changed my work. As May said earlier, I've now produced, I come from a motion picture background, I've now produced 2 videotapes on adoption education and continue to work in the family and adoption areas. And this is my own mini crusade to educate people about adoption when adoption is the choice. And as May and I have discussed, I'm now of the opinion that it's the last choice. Last but not least, for me, living an open adoption has been my way of healing and coming to grips with the pains that I know that my child has. I've changed as a person in the course of the last 6 years of being an adoptive parent, understanding the pains and the losses and the angers that the Triad shares and feel, and we've talked about them here certainly, this conference. Our cooperative adoption is my personal reflection of those changes. It's the best option, I think, for our family in a way, as a way of reconciling the paradoxes that we live with as part of the Triad. So we're still changing as a family and evolving in the world of adoption. I never thought I'd be here speaking, or here at all, 5 years ago. And I think adoption, being a Triad member, has added a texture and a complexity to my life that I never realized. This, I guess, has to do with acknowledging the Holocaust, if you will. And growing up in a family where we all tried to make things okay all of the time, that's been a real shift for me, to be able to say anger is okay and pain is okay, and that wonderful things come from it. All of those dichotomies, if you will, that you were talking about what the search brought, that it brought great pain and great love and fulfillment at the same time. I'm not using your words. I didn't write them down, but those paradoxes have really added for me a tremendous new sense of myself and my world. My newest paradox that I'm living with, and this is where I'll end, is that, as I said before, I've come to believe that adoption is the last choice after exhausting all other alternatives. And the other side, can I imagine living without my son? Not for a moment. And it's a balancing act, and an exhausting one, and of our lives.
Now, do we have any brave person who would like to talk about the experience with the drawings, the colorings?
Is the workshop over at 3:30?
Huh? Which is right now.
Why don't we go to questions?
Anyone have any questions about it? Any comments? It's not an easy thing to tap into.
Or just for us. I mean,
Yeah,
give us a chance
we'd
to-
like a little bit of feedback, you know.
Well, I'm looking at a reunion here coming up real shortly, and I've done, I don't know, I say.
Can you come a little forward so we can get this?
You can't get in that mic.
Oh,
You
okay.
have to repeat the question.
Let me see if I can focus here. One of the things that I did was wrote my daughter's adoptive parents a letter and kind of explained to them where I was coming from in terms of why I needed a reunion, and kind of a little bit about what I wanted out of it, a little bit about what I had experienced, because I had received a letter from them about a year and a half ago now, telling me that I had contacted my daughter, basically within absence. I had a 6-month relationship. She told her parents, then everything went kind of by the wayside, and at the same time she told her parents, I got a 9-page really nasty letter from her adoptive parents saying, I dare you do what you did, and don't you come into our lives, go away. So I wrote a letter to them, and I'm going to have a reunion with everyone middle of June. I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable about the fact that in the letter that I wrote, I brought out these loss issues. I didn't feel comfortable to speak to any of theirs, but I definitely hung myself way out there. I put it out there, and I haven't really spoken to them since. Or I should say they won't speak to me except in brief kinds of conversations about like arrangements and that kind of thing. So nobody's talking about feelings or anything like that. So I don't know how they receive this or what feelings it generated for them or anything like that.
I'm not going to repeat that because it's too long, but if there's a way, if you could send them perhaps before your reunion some books, I think we might have some suggestions, but what comes to mind first is A Handful of Hope. Mm-hmm. Something that isn't quite as personal as your experience, but that might acclimate them a little bit to, because it's very scary, I think, as an adoptive parent who hasn't had any education in reunion or in adoption. But some of those things, they're a little less frightening if they're coming from a third party, and it might make it easier for them to.
Well, I thought about doing that. I've offered it several times to my daughter. My daughter is somewhat also in denial. She's not dealing with any of her own issues that she can speak of. And she says, no, my mother gets reports on every phone call I make. Mother gets to read the letters. Mother is extremely defensive and very protective and these kinds of
Controlling.
Controlling, manipulative. Mothers do that.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to have my level of self-confidence erode completely. I'm trying to stay focused on what I want out of the situation. But I keep coming back to the fact that I seem to be the only one here that has dealt with any of my losses. It's very obvious to me these other people are totally in denial and haven't dealt with anything. And it makes me just wonder what the reception's going to be and what I'm going to get hit with because of that.
This is one of the realities of search and reunion. The person who searches, no matter what part of the triad you are always, almost always, I want to say light years ahead of the one who's found, unless that one who's found has also been searching and going through a process of healing, coming out of denial and getting in touch with those feelings about what happened. So that it takes a long time, and I don't know if the person found ever really catches up. But I think educating, because they can't get to the emotions yet. They have to get some knowledge.
I wonder if it's responsibility of the third party or of the member of the triad to do that. I've already offered that information to my daughter.
Uh-huh.
I've already offered her the literature list, the literature, said what books to read. She's not.
The fact of the matter is this. You have made this available to them. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And the only thing that I would caution you about is having witnessed, as an outsider, I am aware of many, many, many reunions. And the probability of your having a very difficult first reunion with your daughter is absolutely enormous with her adoptive parents there. She will behave as she feels they will expect her to behave.
I'm trying to work with that. I'm calling her ahead of time and suggesting a time, planting the seed to suggest a time, and I've already done it. I told her, if we get this together, when I wrote her adoptive parents, I said, if we get this together, I want some, this is what I want out of the situation. You have to decide what you want.
I'd make it very clear to them. I would make it absolutely empirically clear that you need to meet with her by herself. You need to reunite with your daughter the way you left her, the two of you. And this is spoken from somebody who had a third party there. And I felt like I feel like a teenager who'd been getting laid in the back of a car and got caught by a cop, you know? It was that awful, you know, a feeling of shame, you know? Although that never happened to me. I'd like that.
No, I'm expecting the first night to go over and have dinner with everybody there, so I'll be real nice.
It sounds ghastly. I don't want to go with you.
And then what I'm trying to do is plant the seed to try to get my daughter to, like, for us to be able to go off. But I feel like that she needs to deal with her mom herself. In other words, I don't feel like that it's my place to go up to her mom and say, you know, is it all, I ask permission or this kind of thing. You know, if she still feels that she's hooked into that relationship with those amount of loyalty issues where that's what she feels that she needs to do, then she needs to go ahead and do that.
Does she live at home still?
No, she's graduated from college in 2 weeks, in social work and foster care, and she's been married for 3 years. When I
Why are
contacted
her mom
she
and
was-
daddy going to be there then?
Oh, the reunion is taking place at mommy and daddy's house.
Why are you allowing that to happen?
Because I wrote them a letter and said, you know, can I come down and meet everybody?
I think you need to rethink this a little. You need to, you've initiated it,
Well, I
you need to
did
exert a
that.
little more
Right.
control.
What we find and we've been involved in reunions for many, many years, I personally have been for 18 years, is that the reunions that generally go the best are ones in which at the very first opportunity, earliest opportunity, you can have a one-on-one between mother and child, father and child, whatever, and then bring the others in after that one-on-one happens. Sometimes we don't get the ideal, and if that's the only way you can meet, then you start with that, and then as soon as possible do that. We need to stop because another workshop needs to come in. Thank you.
This is the end of this session.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It was very
That's
good.
a pretty dress you have on today, Beverly.
Thank you.
I love those colors.
Thank you very much.
Good.
Pardon? You had audio tape? I mean,
It's a video.
video tape.
It's a video and 3 audio tapes. That one is a package together. It's at the Parenting Resources table.
Oh, okay.
And then there's another one which is called Open Adoption, which is a round table. It's a videotape on